pouring our Wasser Pilsner. So I like to pour it kind of a way that you normally wouldn't, which is just glug it down into the cup. Try to get some amount of head on that beer. The head for a brewer is something that's desired. You want a head there, you want those bubbles there, and have it being released into the air. Constant bubbles gives your nose constant aroma to pick up on. I'll look up at the clarity of the beer and the color. So this beer right here, you get the condensation off your glass. It's pretty much crystal clear. In brewing or talking about beer, you'd call that bright. Clear would be like water. Bright beer is something you can see through. I'll bring it up to my nose. I'll smell it. I tend to take both short sniffs, long sniffs, bring it around. And I think of kind of scents as, I've heard it described as a delta sense when you smell something. So you can become accustomed to certain smells very quickly. So what I'll do is just take a little of my shirt. Hopefully it smells, like like laundry as opposed to sweat. But either way, it'll still work to kind of reset your senses a little bit, and you can go back and take a whiff of your beer. The other thing, if we're sitting down with the team and having a real kind of tasting session and trying to come up with tasting notes for our new beers, or seeing if a beer is true to brand and consistent, we will sit down with the beer flavor map. So it's widely used and distributed and created by Draft Lab, and it breaks down each of these different flavor compounds that you can find in beer. So fruitiness, grassiness, all the way from caramel notes, metallic, boozy, alcohol. It does that, and then it breaks it down into each subcategory. So fruit would have papaya, mango, blueberries, all these different things, and that helps a lot. And then from there, you would go on and you'd add an adjective to that flavor. So is it, dried mango? Is it overripe pineapple? Is it, fresh cut grass? Is it dried hay? Things like that. So that's how I'll go about sitting down and actually smelling beer. But always very important to taste it. And when you're tasting a beer, you're tasting for carbonation, you're tasting for mouthfeel, any kind of, how it rolls down the tongue, how it goes down the throat, if there's any harshness or smoothness, scratchiness, and of course flavor. So this Pilsner, I would say it is a bright, light gold color. On the smell, it's slightly floral, maybe even a little bit lemony. And obviously has a sort of a non-distinct grain flavor. I wouldn't call it cereally, I wouldn't call it bready, but I would certainly call it grainy, or lightly malty, but not overly sweet, kind of caramelized malt flavors. So a little bit about this specific style. This is meant to be there are subcategories of Pilsner. The main two are a German Pilsner or a Czech Pilsner, or sometimes called Bohemian Pilsner, but a lot of the style guidelines now strictly refer to it as a Czech Pilsner. And what you're looking for in a Czech Pilsner are two things. So a noticeable hoppiness. So if you taste it, it does have some bitterness on the finish. It also has that floral and slight lemony note. that's attributed to the hops. And then it has, the other thing Czech Bohemian Pilsner is known for is this smooth mouthfeel. It's still crisp, it's still light-bodied, but considering how light it is, it has quite a rounded and smooth mouthfeel. Kind of fills your mouth, and goes down really nicely. Has a bit of a residual sweetness too, and that's sort of what relates, what causes that smoother mouthfeel, as well as the water chemistry that's involved in it. So I don't know how many of you got the any kind of food pairing that goes along with it. What I have with me right here is just a little bit of blue cheese. So I chose this because to me this style is kind of a hearty base, or not a hearty base, but a light base. It's the cracker to your cheese board essentially. So I chose something that's a little more bold. This style is so, it paints, the canvas with, a nice base layer that you can pair almost anything with and be happy. It'll wash it down, it'll be refreshing, and you'll be ready for your next bite of food.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go with something salty, something with a little depth of flavor to it, to kind of enhance the whole tasting experience, give your flavor buds some additional stimulation, and then allow them to be brought back down a little bit by the simplistic yet very tasty Bohemian Pilsner.
Yeah, I'm noticing a really long finish on it too. A lot of times in wine, we'll talk about, a wine with regard to finish, length, and it really does sort of have, this little bit of bitterness, but it's not overly bitter on the finish. It's actually still kind of making my mouth water. Soon this will go with, like you said, just a ton of different foods, and stand up to, more sort of sharp blue cheeses and stuff. So.
Yeah. Another thing to mention about this, because this is such a, Pilsner in general is such a widely distributed style. It's, kind of the base style for every macro lager, Budweiser, Coors, Bud Light, Natty Light, natural Bohemian Pilsner. So ours is more of a full malt base. So there's no corn syrup, no rice. In this beer, it's entirely made from malted barley. And the reason it's so light in color, as opposed to, we'll see the next beer, which will be Vienna Lager, is because these grains are so lightly kilned. So all malt is just a grain that is steeped and allowed to germinate. Then it is dried and kilned. And that kilning process will, during that kilning process, you can determine the amount of caramelization of that grain. And in turn, the flavor that grain will eventually provide to your beer. So the reason you get such a pronounced graininess in this style is because of that very lightly kilned malt.